The room is completely silent, yet the air is dense with an invisible, high-velocity friction. It is 3 o'clock in the morning, that suspended, liminal hour where the rest of the natural world has surrendered its weight to the dark, resting deeply within the rhythm of the earth. Outside, a soft, persistent rain slickens the asphalt of the city streets, reflecting the erratic neon pulses of traffic lights that change from red to green for an audience of none. The wind moves through the leaves of the urban trees with a gentle, sighing rustle, a sound that has existed since the dawn of time, carrying no agenda, seeking no destination, simply passing through. But inside the room, sitting on the edge of a bed that feels less like a place of rest and more like a platform of hyper-vigilance, we are awake. The blue light from a smartphone screen casts a cold, pale glow across our faces, illuminating the subtle, taut lines around our eyes and the sharp, unnatural angle of our wrists. We are scrolling, we are checking schedules, reading headlines, tracking metrics, refreshing feeds, and reviewing lists of tasks that must be executed the moment the sun breaks the horizon. Our eyes dart from one column of numbers to the next, scanning for patterns, searching for anomalies, looking for any tiny, hidden variable that might disrupt the fragile architecture of the coming week. The mechanical ticking of a clock somewhere down the hallway sounds incredibly loud in the stillness, each strike of the gears serving as a sharp, unyielding reminder that time is a scarce resource, slippery and dangerous, escaping our grasp with every passing beat. We can feel our hearts pounding a little too fast, a shallow, fluttering sensation against the back of our ribs, a physical manifestation of a deeper existential emergency that we cannot quite name but feel with absolute certainty. We live in a culture that has transformed the pursuit of predictability into a sacred religion, elevating the spreadsheet, the algorithm, and the 5-year plan to the status of divine decrees. From the moment we are old enough to understand speech, we are told that our primary duty in this life is to minimize risk, to eliminate vulnerability, and to build an unassailable fortress around our futures. We are conditioned to believe that a successful life is one that can be perfectly forecasted, engineered, and managed down to the smallest microdetail. We measure our worth by our ability to anticipate every crisis, to hedge against every potential loss, and to ensure that tomorrow looks exactly like today, only slightly more prosperous, slightly more secure, and completely within our control. We invest immense amounts of cognitive and emotional energy into creating the illusion of fixed ground beneath our feet, convincing ourselves that if we just analyze enough data, if we just work enough hours, if we just worry with enough intensity, we can force the wildly unpredictable currents of reality to behave themselves. We want guarantees before we love, assurances before we invest, and absolute certainty before we take a single step into the unknown. We treat the unexpected as a personal failure, an insult to our intellect, or a structural breakdown in our planning, rather than recognizing it as the fundamental, inescapable nature of the universe we inhabit. Yet, despite all our sophisticated tracking systems, our productivity frameworks, and our advanced risk mitigation strategies, we have never felt more profoundly unsafe. The more we attempt to lock life into place, the more terrifyingly fragile we feel, because deep down, in the quietest, most honest corners of our awareness, we know that we are playing an impossible game. We are like someone standing on a tiny, fragile wooden raft in the middle of a vast, deep and endlessly shifting ocean, terrified of the water's natural movement. The ocean beneath us is miles deep, alive with massive unseen currents, tossing our small vessel up and down with the swells, moving according to laws that care nothing for our personal preferences or schedules. Instead of learning how to balance on the moving timber, instead of discovering the inherent buoyancy of our own bodies, we react in a state of absolute panic. We reach down into the bottom of the raft, pull out a massive, heavy iron anchor attached to a thick rope, and with all our might, we hurl it upward into the sky. We throw the iron anchor into thin air, praying with desperate, exhausting fervor that it will somehow catch onto a cloud, that it will hook onto something solid in the empty blue above us, and hold our raft completely still in the middle of the sea. This is the absurd, heartbreaking tragedy of the modern mind. We are continuously trying to anchor ourselves to things that do not possess the capacity to hold us. We look at our careers, our financial portfolios, our relationships, our physical health, and even our own reputations, and we try to treat them as solid, unchanging mountaintops, where we can safely pitch our tents forever. We forget that all of these things are not mountains at all, they are part of the flowing water. A market shifts overnight, a company restructuring renders our position obsolete. A tiny cell within our physical body decides to mutate without our permission. Or a person we love wakes up one morning and realizes their heart has traveled to an entirely different shore. When these things happen, as they inevitably must in a universe governed by change, our world does not just shift, it shatters. We experience the natural movement of life as a violent catastrophe, because we have staked our entire psychological survival on the impossible premise that things should remain exactly as they are. The heavy iron anchor we threw into the air comes crashing back down, tearing through the fragile wood of our raft, threatening to drag us down into the dark depths of the very water we have spent our entire lives trying to ignore. The sheer exhaustion of this collective endeavor is what binds us together in this midnight watch. Our bodies are physically keeping score of this relentless war against reality, absorbing the tension of an unceasing vigil. We carry a background hum of dread through our days, a subtle, toxic whisper that tells us that the next phone call, the next email, or the next medical report could be the one that collapses the entire house of cards we have worked so hard to build. We have become hyper-vigilant architects of a life that is beautiful on the outside, but feels like a highly pressurized pressure cooker on the inside. We are so busy scanning the horizon for potential storms, so consumed by the vital necessity of securing the next year, the next decade, or the next hour, that we have completely lost the ability to inhabit the space where we actually reside. We are physically present in our living rooms, at our dinner tables, and in our beds, but our minds are light years away, wandering through the ghostly, terrifying labyrinths of hypothetical futures, fighting wars that have not yet happened, and solving problems that may never exist. We are starving ourselves of the only reality that can actually nourish the rich, vibrant, and messy present moment, all for the sake of an illusion called certainty, an illusion that slips through our fingers the moment we think we have finally grasped it. What if our entire approach to safety is fundamentally inverted? What if the real danger is not the wild, unpredictable nature of the ocean, but our own stubborn refusal to flow with it? We have treated the fluidity of existence as a cosmic design flaw, an enemy to be conquered, a monster to be tamed by our intellect and our willpower. But the ancient wisdom of the human spirit suggests a radical alternative. That true security is never found by trying to fix running water into stone, but by developing a profound, intimate relationship with the movement itself. It suggests that the freedom we are so desperately seeking does not lie at the end of a perfectly executed plan where nothing ever goes wrong, but at the very beginning of a willingness to step into the stream with an open heart, naked and undefended, trusting that we are made of the very same elements as the water and that we were designed from the very beginning to float. Let us sit with this exhaustion for a moment, not trying to fix it, not trying to schedule it away, but simply acknowledging the immense, crushing weight of trying to control the uncontrollable as we begin to look closer at the intricate mechanisms of our own confinement. To understand how deeply this illusion of control has infiltrated our lives, we must look closely at a character archetype that lives within almost every one of us in the modern world. The figure of the diligent architect, the hyper-efficient optimizer, the tireless micromanager of destiny. This is the part of us that wakes up every day believing that our survival is directly proportionate to our performance, and that if we relax our grip for even a single second, the entire structure of our lives will tilt and slide into catastrophic ruin. On the surface, this character appears incredibly functional, highly successful, and deeply admirable. It is the version of us that receives praise in boardrooms, the one that checks off items on complex to-do lists with satisfying precision, the one that prides itself on having a plan for every contingency, a backup plan for that backup plan, and a digital calendar color-coded to the exact minute. This archetype presents a face to the world that is calm, collected, and utterly competent. It is the person who seems to have solved the equation of life, moving from task to task with an air of absolute mastery, convincing everyone around them and, most dangerously, convincing themselves that they are the undisputed captains of their fate. But if we peel back this polished, high-achieving exterior and look through the lens of a deeper, more intimate anatomy, we discover that this fortress of efficiency is actually a highly pressurized chamber of immense suffering. When we examine this optimizer archetype not by their external titles or bank balances, but through the raw reality of their physical body, a completely different story emerges. The body never lies. While the conscious mind is busy spinning narratives of competence and safety, the somatic nervous system is quietly keeping a precise, unforgiving record of the immense strain required to maintain this front. Let us observe ourselves in those moments when we are driving toward our goals, when the unexpected delay occurs, or when an email arrives that contradicts our carefully laid trajectory. Let us map the physical geography of our control obsession, tracing the concrete pathways through which our anxiety crystallizes into bone and muscle. The journey of this physical preservation begins in the jaw. If we bring our awareness to our face right now, we might notice a subtle, chronic clenching where the mandible meets the skull. This is not a temporary reaction to a passing stressor, it is a permanent structural clamp. We grind our teeth at night, wearing down our enamel while our conscious minds are asleep, because even in our dreams, the optimizer is still working, still planning, still fighting the unpredictable terrain of tomorrow. This clenched jaw is the physical manifestation of unuttered screams of fatigue, the somatic suppression of our deep desire to say no, to stop, to admit that we are tired. It is the muscle acting as a literal dam, holding back the natural expression of our vulnerability, because the optimizer believes that to show even a flicker of hesitation or exhaustion is to invite failure. From the jaw, this lines of tension travels downward, wrapping tightly around the neck and seizing the shoulders. We walk through our days with our shoulders subtly elevated, pulled slightly upward and forward toward our ears, as if we are permanently bracing ourselves for a blow that is about to land from behind. This is the classic, evolutionary fight-or-flight posture of physical armor designed to protect the vital arteries of the throat from an apex predator. Yet, in our modern context, there is no saber-toothed tiger chasing us through the forest. The predator we are running from is a missed deadline, an unfavorable performance review, a fluctuating market, or an uncomfortable conversation with a partner. Our muscles, however, do not know the difference between a physical beast and a psychological projection. The body experiences the constant need for certainty as a state of imminent, lethal danger. The shoulders lock into place, turning the upper back into a hard, unyielding shield of stone, cutting off the free flow of energy and blood between our hearts and our heads. We complain of chronic tension, we seek out massages, we rub our sore necks at the end of a long day, but the moment the physical pressure is temporarily released, our minds instantly re-engage the optimizer's script. and the shoulders immediately snap back into their defensive shrug. The most profound casualty of this somatic locking is our breath. When we are caught in the grip of the certainty obsession, our breathing changes from a deep, natural, and nourishing movement into a high, shallow, and rapid thoracic flutter. If we place a hand on our chest and another on our belly right now, we can observe where the air travels. For the vast majority of us, the breath never drops below the collarbones. It hits a wall of density at the diaphragm and bounces back up. We are effectively hyperventilating in slow motion throughout our entire lives. This shallow, chest-centric breathing is a direct signal to our ancient brain that we are in the middle of a war zone. It triggers a continuous, low-grade flood of cortisol and adrenaline into our bloodstream, keeping our pupils slightly dilated, our heart rate elevated, and our digestive systems compromised. We wonder why we suffer from chronic inflammation, why our stomachs are constantly knotted with distress, and why we cannot sleep even when we are drop-dead exhausted. It is because our breath is telling our body that it is unsafe to rest. We have created an internal environment where relaxation is viewed as a security risk. The optimizer believes that if the body falls asleep, if the breath slows down to a deep, resonant belly rhythm, we will drop the ball, we will miss the warning sign, and the world will catch us unprepared. This physical tightening is directly mirrored by a toxic, exhausting psychological feedback loop that spins endlessly within our thoughts. Because we are terrified of being blindsided by life, the mind develops a highly sophisticated survival mechanism known as catastrophic forecasting. We look into the future, and instead of seeing an open space of infinite possibility, we see a minefield of potential disasters. The mind begins to run simulations of worst-case scenarios over and over again, convincing itself that this mental torment is actually a form of productive preparation. We tell ourselves that if we can imagine every single way a project can fail, every single way a relationship can break, or every single way our health can decline, we will somehow be immune to the pain when it happens. We mistake worry for wisdom, and we mistake anxiety for love. We spend our evenings mentally rehearsing arguments that haven't occurred, drafting defensive emails for criticisms that haven't been leveled, and mourning losses that haven't taken place. The profound irony, the ultimate tragedy of this psychological architecture, is that in our desperate attempt to protect ourselves from future suffering, we are actively inflicting intense, immediate suffering upon ourselves in the present. We are destroying the actual reality of our current life, which might be perfectly peaceful, comfortable, and beautiful in this exact moment, in order to defend against a purely hypothetical ghost that exists only in our imaginations. We sit at beautiful dinner tables surrounded by people who love us, but we cannot taste the food, and we cannot feel the warmth of their presence, because our minds are locked in a boardroom meeting 6 months in the future. We walk through parks filled with sunlight and the songs of birds, but we are blind and deaf to the beauty, because we are internally managing a theoretical crisis that might happen next Tuesday. We have become prisoners of a future that does not exist, using the currency of the only life we actually have, this present breath, to buy a completely fraudulent insurance policy against the natural impermanence of the world. We are holding the water so tightly in our fists, desperate to keep it from running away, that our hands are cramping, our knuckles are white, and we are completely missing the exquisite, refreshing sensation of the water flowing over our skin. We have built a magnificent cage out of our own anxiety, and we are sitting inside it, holding the key in our white-knuckled hands, terrified to turn the lock because we don't know what lies beyond the bars. To heal this profound systemic fracture, we must bring the sharp, uncompromising clarity of the Buddha's insight into the center of our internal theater, using it like a surgical blade to dissect the very structure of our suffering. 2,500 years ago, Sitting quietly beneath the shade of a widespread tree, a human being just like us looked deeply into the mechanics of human anxiety and mapped the exact coordinate where our pain transforms into agony. He did not describe this as a theological problem or a cosmic punishment, but as a simple mechanical error in our psychological processing, a mistake he illustrated through the timeless teaching of the two arrows. Imagine, he said, a traveler walking through an open field who is suddenly struck by an arrow. The arrow pierces the flesh, tearing skin, muscle, and nerve endings, causing immediate, sharp, and undeniable physical pain. This first arrow represents the inevitable, uncontrollable events of human existence on a changing earth. It is the sudden volatility of the world, the market crash that wipes out a lifetime of savings, the medical scan that shows a shadow on an organ, the unexpected text message that ends a relationship, or even the simple, mundane friction of a flight being cancelled or a tire going flat on the way to a vital meeting. These events are the tax we pay for being alive, for inhabiting a physical body made of flesh and bone, and for navigating a world populated by billions of other moving variables. The first arrow is painful, yes, but it is clean. It is simply reality presenting itself as it is, indifferent to our preferences. But then, the Buddha observed, the untrained mind does something extraordinary and deeply tragic. Instead of tending to the wound caused by the first arrow, the traveler reaches into their own quiver, pulls out a second arrow, and drives it with tremendous violence directly into the exact same spot where the first arrow landed. This second arrow is our mental resistance to what has happened. It is the internal screaming of our ego, the frantic, looping narrative that roars. This should not be happening to me. Why didn't I see this coming? How could I have let this happen? What does this mean for my 5-year plan? My entire future is ruined, and I am completely exposed. If we look closely at our lives, we will realize that 99% of the suffering we endure as modern people is not the wound of the first arrow, but the absolute devastation wrought by the second. The first arrow causes pain, the second arrow creates suffering. The first arrow is the reality of a changing circumstance. The second arrow is the violent, desperate refusal to let that circumstance change. When a project fails, the first arrow is the loss of the resource. The second arrow is the 3 weeks of sleepless nights spent flagellating ourselves, tracking our inadequacies, and predicting our ultimate professional demise. When a person leaves us, the first arrow is the sorrow of a broken bond. The second arrow is the obsessive, agonizing mental reconstruction of every conversation, the frantic attempt to rewrite history, and the terrifying projection that we will spend the rest of our lives dying in absolute isolation. We are continuously shooting ourselves with second arrows, turning minor scratches into infected wounds, all because our optimizer mind believes that if it screams loudly enough at reality, reality will somehow back down and apologize. To understand why we are so addicted to shooting this second arrow, we must perform an anatomical dissection of the very entity we are trying so desperately to protect. The ego, the illusion of the solid, permanent self. The Buddha introduced a radical, liberating insight that cuts completely through the core of Western psychological anxiety. The realization that this solid I we are trying to insulate from the storms of life does not actually exist as a static object. We treat our identity, our reputation, and our life trajectory as if they are solid blocks of granite that we must polish, defend, and keep from eroding. We think of ourselves as a fixed fortress standing against a hostile environment. But when we turn the light of direct awareness inward, when we sit in deep silence and look for this solid entity called myself, we find something completely different. We do not find a stone monument. We find a river. We find a continuous high-velocity stream of fleeting thoughts, passing physical sensations, temporary emotional weather patterns, and shifting perceptions. There is no permanent manager sitting inside our heads, directing the show from an unmovable control room. There is only the flowing process of consciousness itself, responding to a constantly changing environment. The anxiety we feel is the direct result of trying to take this fluid, ever-changing river of being and freeze it into a solid block of ice. We are trying to make a permanent monument out of running water. Consider what happens when you attempt to grasp water from a rushing stream. If you approach the river with a spirit of aggression, if you plunge your hand into the current and close your fingers into a tight, desperate fist, what happens to the water? It squirts violently out between your knuckles, escaping through the gaps of your fingers, leaving you with nothing but a cramped, aching hand and a sense of profound frustration. The harder you squeeze, the less water you hold. This is exactly how we live our lives. We squeeze our relationships, we squeeze our careers, we squeeze our children, and we squeeze our daily schedules, trying to force them to remain completely static within our grasp. And the result is identical. The life flows right through our fingers, leaving us feeling empty, exhausted, and bitter. But look at what happens when you change your relationship to the stream. If you walk down to the same river, bend your knees, lower your hand into the current, and simply open your palm wide, flat, and completely relaxed, the water does not run away from you. It flows onto your skin, resting peacefully on the surface of your open hand, cool, refreshing, and alive. You do not own the water. You do not control its direction, and you cannot keep it forever, but you get to experience its exquisite beauty, its vitality, and its true nature without a single ounce of friction. This is the radical shift from the fist to the open palm. This is the understanding that things do not fall apart in our lives because we are bad planners or because the universe is punishing us. Things fall apart because change is their very nature. A cloud does not apologize for dissolving into rain. A wave does not apologize for breaking upon the shore, and a human life does not apologize for moving through seasons of growth, decay, loss, and rebirth. When we realize that our identity is a river rather than a fortress, the entire nature of our fear begins to shift. We see that the unexpected event is not a threat to our existence, but simply the next movement of the water. The optimizer within us gasps at this realization, terrified that if it stops gripping, it will drown. But this is the ultimate illusion that wisdom shatters. The fear of drowning only exists as long as you believe your body is made of lead. The moment you realize your inner nature is identical to the nature of the ocean itself, that you are made of the very same space, the very same movement, the very same intelligence and necessity for an iron anchor completely evaporates. You stop trying to hold onto the clouds, you let the heavy iron weights drop away into the deep blue, and you allow the raft of your life to be carried by the profound, ancient currents of reality, resting in the deep understanding that you are already home. To transition from the intellectual understanding of this truth into a lived, somatic reality requires an architectural rebuild of our relationship with our own minds and bodies. It demands that we step away from the abstract blueprints of how life should be and enter the messy, visceral construction site of how life actually is right now. This is not a passive surrender, nor is it a cold, detached indifference to our goals. Rather, it is the deliberate cultivation of a fierce, gentle discipline that allows us to stand in the center of the storm without being torn apart by the wind. It is the practice of moving from the rigid defense of a stone wall to the resilient, indestructible fluid energy of water. The first foundational pillar of this transformation begins with the systematic softening of our physical armor. Since our obsession with certainty has spent years crystallizing into our muscles, tissues, and nervous systems, we cannot simply think our way out of anxiety. We must inhabit the body and untie the knots from the inside out, starting with a deep, deliberate reclamation of our somatic space. Let us practice this in the small, unscripted moments of our ordinary days when we are sitting at our desks, waiting in traffic, or lying awake in the quiet hours of the night. We begin by bringing a warm, unblinking light of attention directly to the jaw. We consciously invite the upper and lower teeth to separate, creating a microscopic pocket of empty air inside the mouth. We let the tongue drop away from the roof of the palate, allowing it to rest softly like a leaf on the floor of the mouth. The moment the jaw unhinges, a profound, immediate signal travels through the vagus nerve, whispering to the ancient survival brain that the immediate danger has passed. We do not need to scream, we do not need to defend, we do not need to explain. We simply allow the face to melt. From this small opening of space in the mouth, we let our awareness slide down into the heavy beams of our shoulders. Instead of continuing to pull them upward like a shield, we consciously choose to drop them. We let them fall downward and backward, feeling the sudden, immense weight of our own arms hanging freely from our skeletal frame. We imagine that the hard, frozen ice of our neck and upper back is being exposed to a warm, radiant sun, melting away into liquid streams that cascade down our spine. We feel the sudden expansion of our collarbones, opening up the chest cavity, exposing our hearts to the room, undefended and raw. It takes immense courage to lower our shoulders in a world that tells us to brace for impact. But it is the only way to signal to our nervous system that we are safe enough to actually live. With the chest opened and the shoulders dropped, we can finally allow our breath to return to its natural birthplace, deep, dark and spacious cavern of the lower abdomen. We stop breathing from the throat and the collarbones. As we inhale, we deliberately allow the belly to expand outward like a soft balloon. Completely without shame or restriction, we let the air push down against the pelvic floor, massaging our internal organs, opening up spaces that have been starved of oxygen for years. And as we exhale, we do not push the air out with force, we simply open our mouths slightly and let the breath fall out of us. Letting go of the need to control even the ending of the exhalation, we ride the breath like a wave, watching it rise from nothing, reach its peak, dissolve back into the silence, and rest in that tiny, pregnant pause before the next wave naturally begins its journey upward. In this deep abdominal rhythm, we are teaching our body a radical form of trust. The trust that the next breath will arrive exactly when it is needed, without us having to schedule it, manage it, or worry it into existence. As the body softens, we gain the stability required to practice the second pillar of our transformation, the art of the open palm, in the midst of our cognitive storms. When we are caught in the grip of the optimizer mind, our thoughts feel like solid, undeniable facts. When the mind whispers, "If this project fails, your entire career is over," we believe it instantly, and our body reacts with an immediate surge of adrenaline. The practice of insight requires us to change our relationship with these thoughts, shifting from being the actor inside the movie to being the quiet, unmovable screen upon which the movie is projected. When an anxious thought arises, a dark forecast about next month's finances, or a sudden wave of panic about a relationship, we do not fight the thought. We do not try to suppress it, argue with it, or replace it with a positive affirmation. To fight our thoughts is simply to shoot ourselves with a third arrow, adding more friction to an already burning house. Instead, we use the gentle power of mental labeling. We look directly at the monster of our worry, and we label it for what it actually is. We say to ourselves quietly and with immense tenderness, thinking, planning, forecasting, there is a wave of fear passing through. By naming the process rather than identifying with the content, we instantly create a vital, life-saving distance between our awareness and our psychology. We realize that we are not the anxiety, we are the vast, silent space that is aware of the anxiety. We are not the storm, we are the sky through which the storm is passing. A cloud does not damage the blue sky by raining, a hurricane does not tear the sky apart. The sky simply allows the weather to happen, holding it with absolute spaciousness. knowing that every storm eventually runs out of water and dissolves back into the light. When we label our planning mind, we strip it of its authority. We see that the urgent need to control tomorrow is not a divine command, it is just an old, habitual neural loop playing out its ancient survival script. We can smile at it, thank it for trying to keep us safe, and choose to remain seated on the stable ground of the present moment. This leads us to the third and most advanced practice of radical fluidity, the cultivation of high intention paired with low attachment. The optimizer mind believes that there are only two choices in this life. Either we become an obsessed, hyper-vigilant control freak who manages every detail, or we become a lazy, passive victim who lies on the couch and does nothing at all. Wisdom reveals that there is a third way, a beautiful, elegant middle path that allows us to engage with the world with maximum energy while remaining completely unattached to the specific outcome. Imagine a master archer stepping onto the training ground. They have a high intention. They pick up their bow with absolute precision. They place the arrow against the string with perfect focus, and they pull the string back until their muscles are taut with potential energy. They align their eye with the target, measuring the wind, calculating the distance, bringing every ounce of their training, their intelligence, and their life force into this single point of focus. This is high intention. They care deeply about the shot, but the moment their fingers open and the arrow flies from the bow, the master archer practices low attachment. Once the arrow is in mid-air, the archer does not run down the field after it, trying to push it with their hands or scream at the wind to stop blowing. They do not tear their hair out in anxiety about whether it will hit the center bullseye. They know that once the arrow has left the bow, it belongs to the sky. It belongs to the crosswinds, to the gravity of the earth, and to the unpredictable movements of the atmosphere. The archer's job ended the moment the string was released. They step back, breathe deeply, and drop their arms, completely at peace with whatever the arrow meets. Because their dignity and their inner stillness were never dependent on the target, their fulfillment was found in the absolute presence of the shot itself. We can apply this precise architecture of the archer to every single dimension of our modern lives. We can write our business proposals with high intention, pouring our creativity, our intellect, and our labor into the pages. But the moment we press send on that email, we must release the arrow. The response of the client, the decision of the board, and the movement of the market do not belong to us. They belong to the vast, interlocking river of conditions that we do not control. We can love a person with high intention, opening our hearts to them, caring for their well-being, and showing up for them with absolute loyalty. But what they do with that love, how they respond to our vulnerability, and whether they choose to stay or leave belongs to their own internal stream, not ours. When we live with high intention and low attachment, the chronic pressure that has been crushing our spirits completely evaporates. We no longer walk into rooms carrying the heavy, exhausting burden of having to guarantee a specific result. We stop treating every meeting, every conversation, and every day as a test that we must pass or a battle we must win. We discover the immense joy of pure action, action that is born out of love, creativity, and presence, rather than action that is driven by the desperate, fearful need to secure a hypothetical future. We become incredibly effective because we are no longer wasting 80% of our cognitive energy on worry and catastrophic forecasting. We bring a clean, undistracted, and radiant mind to the task at hand, hitting the mark not because we were terrified of missing, but because we were entirely alive when we let the arrow fly. When we finally stop fighting the natural movement of the world, a profound, crystalline stillness settles over the landscape of our consciousness. This stillness is not the cold, dead quiet of an icy winter peak, nor is it the fragile peace of a simulated sanctuary where we have successfully hidden from life's problems. It is the vibrant, alive, and utterly unshakable peace of the open ocean itself, a radical fluidity that does not require the weather to change in order to feel secure. The frantic, high-velocity friction that once consumed our late-night thoughts begins to dissolve into a spacious, luminous clarity. We look around our lives, and for the first time in decades, we are actually there to see it. The sensory world returns to us with an exquisite, breathtaking intensity. We notice that the colors of the leaves on the city trees look infinitely more vivid, no longer obscured by the gray, distorting fog of our catastrophic forecasting. The sound of the morning rain against the window pane is no longer a stressful disruption to our schedule, but a complex, beautiful symphony playing across the roof of the world. When we sit across from a colleague, a friend, or a child, we can look directly into their eyes and hear what they are saying, because our minds are no longer trapped in a boardroom meeting 6 months in the future, trying to solve a crisis that has not yet occurred. We feel an immense, somatic sense of relief radiating through our physical bodies. Our jaws are soft, our shoulders are dropped, and our breath sinks deeply and effortlessly into the dark, warm spaces of our abdomen, moving like a slow, rhythmic tide that trusts the shore it lands upon. This is the state of absolute arrival, the deep realization that this exact breath, this exact moment, with all its unresolved questions and unpredictable shifts, is the only destination that ever truly mattered. We have laid down the crushing, impossible burden of the next hour. We have stopped demanding that the universe provide us with written guarantees before we allow ourselves to be happy. We discover a quiet, self-sustaining dignity that does not require external validation or structural symmetry to know its own worth. We can watch a market fluctuate, we can handle an unexpected medical report, or we can look at a calendar that has been completely disrupted, and instead of spiraling into panic, we can lean into the shifting currents with the graceful agility of a master dancer. We see that when everything is uncertain, anything is possible. The fluid terrain that we once viewed as a lethal minefield is transformed into a fertile playground of infinite creative potential. In the final hours of his long journey on this earth, as he lay resting between two blossoming trees, the Buddha turned to the weeping disciples gathered around him and offered his final words of guidance. He did not give them a new rule book. He did not offer them an algorithmic guarantee of safety, and he did not build a wall to protect them from the grief of his passing. Instead, he simply pointed them back toward the fundamental truth of the river. He reminded them that all conditioned things, all forms, all structures, all plans, and all human bodies are inherently subject to decay and change. And then, with his very last breath, he delivered a fierce, radiant invitation. Strive for your liberation with diligence, be a lamp unto yourselves. This final instruction was not a call for aggressive, hyper-vigilant self-correction, but a profound affirmation of our own innate architecture. He was reminding us that we do not need to build an external fortress out of stone to protect ourselves from the currents of life, because our true nature is already identical to the light. We possess within ourselves an indestructible capacity to adapt, to float, to perceive truth clearly, and to love without fear, regardless of how wildly the ocean tosses our small wooden raft. The freedom we have been chasing through endless spreadsheets, productivity frameworks, and risk mitigation strategies has been sitting quietly inside our own undefended hearts from the very beginning, waiting for us to simply drop the heavy iron anchor and open our hands flat to the stream. The morning light begins to break through the cracks of the window blinds now, washing over the room with a soft, amber warmth, signaling the arrival of a brand new day that has never existed before in the history of the cosmos. The mechanical clock down the hallway continues its steady, rhythmic ticking, but the sound has lost its sharp, predatory bite. It is now just a gentle passing vibration in an infinite field of silence. The blue light of the screen is turned off, and the white-knuckled fist has relaxed completely into an open, empty palm, resting peacefully on the sheets. The future remains entirely unwritten, completely unpredictable, and wonderfully beyond our control. Yet there is no longer a single trace of dread left inside our chests. We are ready to step into the world, naked, flexible, and completely alive. If you finally stopped treating the unpredictable, fluid nature of your life as an enemy to be conquered, if you dropped the illusion of control and laid down the heavy burden of the next hour, who would you be in this very crystalline moment?